do in their position to implement that plan. It may differ if you've got someone running for a local government office, a county, state, so on. So I think the criteria, and Greg, correct me if I'm wrong, the criteria is they must be in at least 80% agreement with the platform in order to be vetted. So really the only criteria for vetting a candidate, it has absolutely nothing to do with any other factor other than their alignment with our platform. The process is which, yes, Greg, I'll go ahead and recognize you to answer some of this question.
They also need to be a registered libertarian, not think about doing it in the future, and they need to be a member of the Libertarian Party to be recognized and to be vetted by the party.
Okay, be recognized and vetted by the party. Who all's on the committee? How does that committee get appointed that we're talking about here?
The candidates committee and the nominating committee is both appointed by the chair and approved by the EC.
Okay, how many, and this says at least 5 members of the LPF.
Yeah, at least 5 members, and I don't believe there's any limitation on how many people can be on the nominating committee either. So there's no limitation other than it has, the candidates committee has a minimum of 5 under this motion.
On this motion, the candidates committee does not do the vetting.
Right.
The nominating/selection committee does the vetting, and then they get sent to the
Candidates. Okay.
Right.
Right.
So now the question on that is, how do we as a party, are these questionnaires put up on the website so we can see how the candidates answer?
Well,
So,
Oh, that's a good idea. I don't think we're doing that now, Greg, but that's something we can certainly do.
I mean, it needs to be, we need to be open and transparent so that that personal animus that has happened in times past doesn't come into play, and we as a party see open and, what's going on so that we can either voice opposition or understand who's being vetted and who's not and why they're not being. I just like the word approved.
Right.
As well.
Well,
being vetted and approved.
A lot of this has to do with the changes in Florida state law over the years. It used to be, for those of you that don't know, that the Libertarian Party of Florida would actually nominate candidates. And now that we have the complete primary system where anyone who's a registered libertarian can run for that position, I mean, we could very well have, for example, Charlie Crist want to throw his name on as a libertarian. Something like that. Now, obviously, we can't prevent that person from running as a libertarian, but what we can make the decision to do is whether or not we, as the state party, support that candidate in any way. So that's why we have the candidate committee, which identifies, recruits candidates. We have the nominating committee, we're changing the name to selection committee. So I'll just say the selection committee going forward. The selection committee actually performs the vetting, which is to ensure that the candidates' positions are consistent, at least 80%. Is it 80%?
Yes, sir. And at that point, the nominating committee is not the one who makes the decision. At that point, the nominating committee presents this candidate to the LPFEC to make the decision.
So the EC actually approves or...
We do the running around checking it out, and the EC has the final word when we present our report on the candidate.
So on this constitutional amendment, do we want to have the transparency put into this so that we can see what's going on?
Yes, Charles?
I believe I can respond to that. Whatever the committee does, it should be made available to the EC. It's part of the reporting requirements that are already, I believe every committee has. If not, they probably should. But yeah, we've already talked about that, is making that information as part of what goes back to the EC to vote on available.
Right.
Does that answer your question at all?
Well, what I'm looking for is to have it up on our website where the different counties, different affiliates can see, how the candidates did, so that the LPF members can see. I don't mind the EC doing the voting on that. That's fine because we vote for them.
Scott, I think I know where you're going with this, and I agree 100% that we should be posting this information on the website. Whether we want that codified as high as in our constitutional document is another thing. But I think that should be something that should be specified in our standing rules. And for those of you who don't, yes, you have point of information?
Yeah, that would be part of the selection committee, which is going to come down in a different bylaw.
Right.
In a different change.
Yeah.
This is just the candidate committee, so that would be something that would be an amendment to
To the selection
to
committee.
the
Yeah.
selection committee, which is
Yeah.
going to be down the road.
But at this point, we are on the creation of the candidate committee in Article 3, Section 9 of the Constitution. So the floor is still open for discussion. Please rise to be recognized. Yes, Carl.
How, if at all, would this have been affected, or maybe later on, and as we go on in a couple of the other ones, would this have been affecting the Franklin Perez situation?
I don't believe it.
At all, or anything?
Well, the situation with Franklin Perez is he was originally vetted by the nominating committee, and then later his vetting or approval by the EC was withdrawn because it was the determination of the EC that Franklin violated the non-aggression principle for positions he held in the Carl Zimmerman case. So his vetting was withdrawn. So the process itself, I don't see that it would have had any effect, because under this process, I would say that the EC would still have the authority to withdraw the approval of a candidate if they felt they had either violated the NAP or strayed so far from the platform that it was no longer in the LPF's interest to approve them as a candidate.
Thank you.
Okay. Curtis?
I just got a quick question. It seems to be a bit vague here. Is directing and preparing potential candidates for the selection committee. I take it that the potential candidates are candidates for election, in a national or a state or national election, versus candidates for the selection committee itself.
It's both.
I'm looking at it vague. Clarify.
Well, in order to become vetted, they have to be candidates, so I guess to go to above, in front of the selection committee first. and then
Right.
come back.
I understand that. I'm saying it seems to be vague. I'm not sure what this thing as it's written, it seems to be, it could be suggested that the people that are actually on the selection committee are preparing it for their candidates or their candidates on the selection.
I understand the question, Curtis, and Danielle, you're recognized to address that.
Thank you. Because part of the candidate committee also does recruiting, we would be recruiting them before they would be vetted. So that means we recruit them and then send them off to, which is why it says it like that. We would actually then send them to the vetting process. We couldn't do any further help with them except for recruitment until they were vetted and approved by the EC.
Right, so a failure of being vetted by the selection committee or a failure of approval by the EC would prevent the candidate committee with working with that potential candidate any further. Yes.
I think what he's saying is that in that one sentence where you have directing and preparing potential candidates for the selection committee before review by the selection committee.
Right.
I'm sorry, Ray, can you repeat that? I didn't catch all of that.
Just to add the word review by.
Yeah.
Okay, okay. Ray, is that an amendment?
I believe that's what he was saying. That's what he was saying.
Okay, do I have a motion to amend the main motion?
Yes.
Dana makes the motion. Do I have a second to amend the main motion? Okay, Scott McNaughton seconds.
Alex has to accept
He's
it.
seconding the motion.
Right.
He has to approve the
He has to
amendment.
approve it for a friendly amendment.
This is not a friendly amendment. This is actually an amendment. So we will go through the parliamentary procedure. We will have a vote on the amendment first, and then we will drop down to the main motion. Okay. So at this time, we have a motion on the floor for the amendment. Ray, can I ask you to restate the motion, the amendment exactly, the reword?
Yes, in the sentence where it says directing and preparing potential candidates for the selection committee, it would be for review by.
Oh, for review. So it's just to insert the words review by.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. All right. Discussion on the amendment. And folks, just to clarify, at this point we are discussing the amendment to include the words review by, and that is the motion currently on the floor. This is not a vote on the main motion. So having seen no discussion, yes, David.
Yes, and instead of it review by, it seems that very large long sentence should be broken up into two sentences. One of them would be preparing the candidate for the the selection committee, and then stop after that with, after vetted and approved, then train the person.
It says to train better
That's
and
the-
approve. That
If
would
you
be
have a
just-
comma instead of a period, which, you know, run-on sentence really.
Well, there was a semicolon up there, this is what all the duties of the candidate committee shall include, and that's what it was. It just went, it was all the duties.
There was
Okay.
a comma because of the list.
If I may, what he's saying is right, we just need a semicolon instead of a comma after committee.
Exactly, I think that would be better.
Okay, that I'll accept as a friendly amendment to the current amendment, to add the words review by and include a semicolon after the selection committee. And I think that would be grammatically proper.
Yes.
Okay, so friendly amendment, that was moved by, I'm sorry, who moved and who seconded the amendment?
You got,
Ray moved
and Scott McNaughton seconded.
and Scott seconded. All right, Ray, do you approve the addition of the semicolon after the word committee? Okay, Scott, do you approve? Okay, so we'll consider that part of friendly amendment. We are still discussing the amendment to the main motion, which is adding the words review by and adding a semicolon after the word selection committee. Further discussion on the amendment. Having heard none, the question is called. All in favor of the amendment, please rise. Okay, I see a majority. The amendment passes. Now, the main motion is back on the floor and still open for discussion. And again, the main motion is to add to the Constitution, Article 3, Section 9, the creation of the candidate committee. The floor is open for discussion on the main motion as amended. Yes?
Mr. Chair, I move to strike the language directing and preparing potential candidates for the selection committee.
Okay. And, all right, we have a motion to amend the main motion, and this actually, the main motion as amended, the motion is to strike identifying potential Libertarian Party candidates.
No,
Okay?
is the section that states reviewing and directing and preparing potential candidates for the selection committee.
Okay, so you're moving to strike the part of the sentence that says directing and preparing potential candidates for review by the selection committee?
Yes.
You're moving to strike that statement?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Do I hear a second for this amendment?
Second.
John Wayne Smith seconds. Floor is open for discussion. Go ahead, Danielle.
If you strike that sentence out, what you're doing is taking away the power of the candidate committee to recruit any candidates.
Yeah, I will, for those of you that didn't hear Danielle, she said that if you take that sentence out, you take away the ability of the candidate committee to actually perform a recruitment role, which I think is vital to this committee and vital to the process. Yes, Alex, you're recognized.
I would like to ask Mike why you want to remove that.
Okay, the question, please address questions to the chair, Alex.
That's not why the motion was brought forward.
Yeah, Mike, I will go ahead and ask you to expound upon that.
I will not comment.
Okay, so no comment on that. Further comments on this amendment? Oh, Scott.
That's good. All right, I'm in agreement with you, with the chair, to strike this. The potential review by, directing and preparing potential candidates for review by the selection board, candidates from outside the party, not knowing how our political structure works, structure of posts, works within the Libertarian Party, going over the platform with them and explaining what that platform is as part of preparing potential candidates. Once they go over that platform, submit it off to the selection committee. The way I'm reading this, the candidate committee is out of the loop until the selection committee is done with what they're supposed to do. It's part and parcel of recruiting. Do you believe in the, here's the platform, do you believe in this, do you believe in this? Going through and directing, okay, this is how you submit to the selection committee. It's the teeth in this is the teeth in this particular amendment necessary to go outside the party and bring people in that were raised as Democrats or Republicans or what have you. Is part of the education process of outside people coming in to run as candidates in the party. So that part's necessary.
Okay, further discussion on this amendment? Yes, you recognize?
Going along with what he says, I completely agree. I think it's extremely vital. I mean, from a military standpoint, you can't just transfer from a civilian into the military without any direction or preparation to being in that sort of field. I think that that's a crucial role of the committee as it stands, that it has to happen because we want people to adhere to strict principles that the Libertarian Party would offer. So.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, it's, to keep with the military analogy, the candidates committee is the recruiter, the selection committee is the processing center, and then the candidate committee becomes the drill sergeant. So that's kind of the process there. Yeah. Further discussion on this item? Having seen none, the question is called. All in favor of the amendment to strike basically the recruiting function from the candidate committee, please rise.
I think it's illegal. Go ahead.
Motion fails. Okay. All right, so we are now back on the main motion, and that is to basically create the candidates committee. Floor is now open for discussion. Having seen none, the question is, oh, I'm sorry, discussion, yes?
A point of grammar. I don't think we need another semicolon, but I do think we need to change to training, and to identify and train to identifying and training.
Okay. Help me out with that again. I've got, you're saying to train.
It says to identify and train.
There's train in there twice.
Could it be repeated a little louder?
Basically, like grammar reasons, because the first sentence says identifying, so the other sentences should say training, and so instead of to train, it would be a grammar.
Convert the verb tense basically and make it training as opposed to training.
Right.
I would consider that a grammatical correction that does not in any way change the functionality of the document. So I'm going to rule that that's within your prerogative to make that correction as a clerical grammar statement because it has no